Howard, I got hurt at work in the warehouse and my boss doesn't believe me.
Aiken Law has over 100 attorneys and staff ready to work for you. If you've been hurt on the job, in a car accident, or suffered a medical mistake, call 312-6-million.
The fact that we had the first pick today, and we're currently in first place is something that I don't take for granted. Not an easy thing to do, but certainly represents the progress we've made as an organization. And we hope to continue this special year. Regardless of how the year plays out, we've accomplished a lot this year, and today certainly signifies something that it's a big deal for the organization, and to be able to secure that with what the team has done on the field, and get another win today and officially win the series, and start hopefully a new run at home as well. So it's been a good day so far. At the end of the day, we were most comfortable with Roch Cholowsky with our first pick, regardless of what the signing bonus was going to be. Now there was a fair amount of debate on which was the best selection for the Chicago White Sox. But as we really spent time the last couple weeks and dialing in on what's best for us, who's someone that we feel like can really come into this organization, fit in, we've really gotten to know Roch. We've had him into Chicago, spent time with him personally. He spent time with Ryan Fuller. He spent time, with Will Venable and others throughout the organization. And we've had people that have met Roch Cholowsky and felt so comfortable with him, we didn't even need to watch him play. That's how high character and impressive this human being is. And then you look at what he has done throughout his baseball career, both at UCLA, but prior to that, and we had interest with him in him in high school, and then to be able to watch his college career unfold and see what he accomplished and the impact that he had on his teammates and that program, and now to envision that type of influence within this organization is something that attracted us to select him at number one.
Nice to meet you, and congratulations. You mentioned having lunch with Ryan Fuller, and also just like a bunch of people in the organization. Just what have you learned in that process that maybe made you feel like this was a good fit for you, or kind of made you understand like how this organization works, and how they develop hitters in a way that seems like it can work well with you?
Yeah, I mean, both things. I mean, the whole office, just seeing how invested they were into the players. It really felt like to me like a college clubhouse. It didn't feel like what I imagined pro ball being. Especially after meeting with a lot of other teams and being in different clubhouses in the past couple weeks. It was just a different feel in there. It was something that I felt like I could go in there and be a part of. That's the kind of environment that I strive in. But meeting with Ryan Fuller for lunch, I mean, it was supposed to be a quick 30, 45-minute lunch and then get out of there and see him at the game. But, I mean, we sat and talked for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just about hitting and everything, and, just running me through their scouting reports, what they do for players. He ran me through the Colson Montgomery story about how he struggled a little bit, and I took him back and, did some things to help him, and now seeing him do big things at the big league level is pretty cool. But, I mean, just being able to understand, how much goes into it and how invested those guys are into the players, something that I'm really excited about. I mean, talking to Getz on the phone after the pick, and getting a text from Fuller and Barfield and Nevin. They're super invested into the players, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
The bit about it feeling like a college team, that's something like players here say a lot, and obviously you just are coming off of being a leader of a college team. How similar do you feel like the vibe or like kind of the atmosphere they have is the one you tried to cultivate with UCLA?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very similar. I mean, that was the main thing. When I came back to my house in Westwood, and one of my roommates asked how was it, that was the biggest part for me was, the clubhouse dynamic, seeing how much fun those guys have, how much they enjoy seeing other guys succeed. They were all great to me. I got to watch I got to see Antonacci, Vargas, Mydroff, all those guys hit before the game in the tunnel. And, just the fun banter, coming up to me, treating me like I was, one of them. I got to sit down with, Noah Schultz and have lunch before the game. It just seemed like everybody liked everybody. It wasn't a selfish group. Everybody was pulling for each other, and that's kind of the thing that felt most like college.
We looked under the hood, and there was still a lot of consistency with underlying numbers. Whether it be myself or Ryan Fuller, when we talk about the decision-making scores and the contact scores and the power scores, it was right on par, pretty close to being on par with what he had done in the past. Now, when you really break down the swing, there are some things that probably needs to be adjusted at some point. And knowing that he's been very open-minded, excited to really dive in on his offensive game, and if we feel like, or we did feel like that, if we unlock that, we've got an even better player than where he currently is. So, and just like most players, when you're thinking about and planning, future development, you've got to have players that are open-minded and have the work ethic and the acumen to make those adjustments. We felt like Roch had that. You look at his defense, the way he commands the field. He's a quarterback on the field. It just stood out. It really did. And then what he's accomplished. Sure, he's a famous player, a guy that was projected to be the #1 overall pick coming into the season. So there's a lot of eyes and there's a lot of critiquing, and oftentimes there can be fatigue. We've seen that year in and year out on players that are ranked that highly, and publicly, you're tracking that as well, and get an idea of perhaps what other organizations are feeling. But in this particular draft, there were 3 players at the top, and yeah, you could make an argument for any of them. You really could. But when we got to know Roch, and we've got a really strong feeling of our foundation and what we're about, this felt like it was the best fit.
I mean, every hitter's different. I mean, that's the thing that we really connected on was, we both know that, not everyone's going to swing the same way. Not everyone's going to move the same way. It's just finding what works best for you. And, he had told me that, other people question some of the ways that I swing the bat or how I set up. And, he said, it's how you hit. It's how you hit forever. And, we're going to do our best to, try and elevate that, which, I really appreciate because there's a lot of people that critique my swing and how I hit. It's gotten me to where I'm at today. And, the questions are obviously questions that people are going to have. But, he was just very adamant about getting me better at what I'm good at.
Well, we're fortunate to have a quality major league team right now, and to have, 3 of our major league infielders have 20 home runs going into the All-Star break. That speaks to, the talent that currently is on this field, and quite honestly, made us even more comfortable because, when you talk about a collegiate #1 pick, there's naturally a gravity and perhaps some pressure to get that player to the big leagues. But because of where we're at the major league level, especially in the infield at the shortstop position, we can let his development take shape naturally. That was a factor. It really was. So, there's some adjustments that need to be made. Not a whole lot. They could happen quickly, and that'll dictate, how quickly he works his way through the minor leagues. But you've heard me say it many a times. You can never have good, enough shortstops, and the value of a shortstop is, they're usually the best athletes on the field. They can play different positions, and we want to put together a club that has a lot of those players and traits that allow us to be versatile and and build depth and allow us to be competitive throughout a long what can be a challenging major league season. So to have different options is something that we've been set out to do.
Finding out a couple of days ago that I was the guy that they wanted, and then it ended up whether or not it was going to work out. So having the conversations the last couple of days with Shirley and Getz and my agent was very stressful. And then this morning waking up to a call at around like 8:45, 9. I went and got myself a hotel room around the corner from my house just because I was a little stressed out and, worried about what was going to happen. I felt very tied to Chicago ever since I went out there, and, it was just where I wanted to be. And, I was worried about that not working out on their end, and, getting a call from, my agent that him and Getz were able to work something out today. It was just, I was jumping around my hotel room. There were, a lot of tears, and I was just excited to get here and, share the moment with everybody. So, I didn't share it with anybody, while I was here. I wanted everyone to find out on TV. So, I kept it with me, and then, just being able to hear my name called was unbelievable. So
learned, and what I've learned is we're living the life. We're in Major League Baseball. We're working for the Chicago White Sox. You just assume that everyone knows what's going on. So many people in this room or at the Major League level, you're getting feedback all of the time. But a college player, a high school player, they've only been to perhaps a few of the cities or a few of the Major League stadiums. So, it was a chance for Roch to get comfortable or get to know Chicago. He fell in love with it. And to spend time with, the staff that we had here, with some front office members to coaches. He met some players. He met Jerry.
There was originally I didn't want to come out. A couple weeks before they'd asked me to go, I just I kind of wanted to let things play out. I didn't really, I'd never been out to the Midwest for the most part, and I'd never been out to Chicago. I was very hesitant to go out there. Just because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But the second that I got off the flight and, Josh Barfield picked me up from the airport, like it was, I was wide eyed the entire week. I was there for 3 days. And, when I was leaving the field after Montgomery's walk off, I had told them I wish I could have stayed for another week. But, the whole experience, being able to go to dinner with Getz and Barfield, being able, they dropped me off at the hotel right after dinner, and I walked around Chicago till 2 a.m. Just trying to understand, what it's all about and see everything that has to come with it. And then, the next day getting to sit down with Fuller and then, walked again for 5 more hours before the game, and then being able to go to the game, meet everybody, see the stadium, meet the players, see the dynamic. I left, the next morning and called my agent and told him that, that's where I want to be. And, he's got to do whatever he can to make it work, because I know that that's where I want to be. And I hope that they feel the same way about me. So, being able to work it out in the long end, the tears were all happy tears. I'm very excited to be a part of it. I fell in love with the city while I was out there, and I'm very excited to get back.